Thank you very much, and thanks to IHAF for having me today. And I look forward to this session and the hopefully the good questions and conversations to follow. So today we're going to talk around the application of artificial intelligence in the world of the in-house studio and imagery, and really how artificial intelligence can help us in our day-to-day work and actually help us leverage the great information that's often buried within the images that we produce and the way that we use them within an organization. So really, I'd like to start off by just taking a step back and thinking about the fact that content really in today's world really defines our everyday experience when interacting with an organization or a company, particularly in today's multi-channel world where we're interacting not just in person or in a store, but online, and not just online on a web browser on a desktop, but online on our mobile devices. And increasingly, we were getting to the point of screens everywhere when we were moving around. And today, in today's environment where we're all sort of working from home and sort of on lockdown and restricted movements, maybe our mobile devices are becoming even more important in the way that we actually interact with a brand. And centered to that is the imagery. We recently did a survey just prior to lockdown. We did a survey of a lot of retail customers asking around the way that they interact with content. And what came out of that is well over half of the respondents expect imagery or video or some sort of visual reinforcement of what the product is. And they also expect that imagery to be relevant to them, relevant to the product they're looking at, relevant to the season, and actually also provide links to even more imagery and more information about the product. So really, as I said, content really is at the center of everything that we do when we interact with a company. And increasingly, there is the expectation that imagery is centered to that experience as well, that it's just becoming more and more the defining piece of content and making what we do within a studio environment even more essential to the business. So how do we actually leverage that? How do we make sure that what we're producing is really useful both to the customer and to the business? Well, the first thing is we really need to know what we've got. Often when we're talking to Nexeo customers or in my consulting days, it was always amazing that the amount of companies who don't know what they've got. When I was running a studio team, just finding what was spread around the organization, particularly large organizations that have different business units or multi-brands or different locations, geographical locations. Just knowing what you've got can be really difficult. And sometimes when you don't know what you've got, you end up duplicating information. We did find in some of the research that we've done at Nexeo that in around 60% of times that people can't find information or can't find the image they want, they will actually go off and recreate it. Just to give an example, we have an apparel client which manages multi-brands. Every one of those brands has within its line a basic white t-shirt, yet they on average organize 32 different photo shoots a year just to take pictures of what is basically the same white t-shirt, because people either can't find it within a brand or they can't find the previous photo shoots. So it becomes very expensive and inefficient to be doing the same thing over and over again. Also, even with the rapid growth of in-house studios and increase in in-house studios, I'm sure most of you agree, you're still having to actually coordinate with multiple suppliers, external agencies as well as your internal ones, maybe coordinating with the people who are actually supplying the products to be photographed, working with talent agencies and so forth. There's a whole coordination that you need to build around the imagery that we're producing. It's not just about the image anymore. So really we need to look at how can we centralize and manage those collections of content and metadata. And that doesn't necessarily mean having everything in one database, but just having a common way to actually access the information that we need. And we've been doing some research about where we see digital assets being used across the enterprise. And the Photo Studio really is the centerpiece of that. Sort of upstream of the Photo Studio is looking at digital assets around, what materials are used in a product, and then how does that feed into things like 3D design? Again, something that over the last 4 or 5 months has become much more of a focus of a lot of organizations we're talking to, is how do they actually move to a digital supply chain where they're not shipping physical materials around, and whether they're looking more at doing sort of digital and 3D prototyping than physical prototyping. How are we actually getting that into a state where we can actually produce photography of an imagery of the product? How does that feed into things like packaging design, marketing campaigns, and then sort of downstream at the sort of post-sales environment, people who are actually interacting with the customers, making sure that the imagery has the right information, that it can be useful on an e-commerce site, or that somebody on the end of a 1-800 line knows all about the product. They know when it went on sale, where the variants are, what colors it's available in. They know what campaigns have been out there, so they know what offers are around it, whether it's on sale at a particular point, and all that sort of information. And all that can really, we see the real value is in connecting your content assets, your imagery, with the systems information around the organization. By doing that, we call this a product asset management strategy, but by doing that, you can really provide value to the imagery that we're producing within a studio environment by connecting that content to the business data across the organization. And we'll come back to this sort of importance of the business systems and the business data when we get into a bit more of the detail of AI. But behind all that really is this concept of, by connecting the content assets to the data throughout the product lifecycle and building this sort of digital supply chain that I just mentioned, that we can really speed up the time it takes between having an idea, building it, delivering it, and supporting it, and really accelerate the ideas and product ideas to market, and use the digital assets and the imagery as really the connective tissue to drive that process. And by having that more efficient digital supply chain, you hopefully can get products to market earlier, you can meet trends, develop new products as environment and culture changes, and get increased value out of your assets, and actually get to a revenue stream a lot sooner than we used to under a more traditional analog sort of process. But how do we do that at scale? Well, what we're finding is that when it actually comes to scaling up and doing things quickly and in large numbers, that we often need, that really the old ways of managing content and data are not really working. Come as no surprise, but most organizations, their systems are not fully connected to each other. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have one database or one system to rule them all, but really you should have systems that talk to each other and allow data to flow between them, or at least be linked and found. But that is very rarely the case. And on average, people are spending just under an hour a day looking for information, looking for content, looking for imagery, and that adds up to a big number by the end of the year. If you think about the number of people in a large organization, if they're all spending an hour a day, 20%, 12% of their time just looking for stuff instead of doing. And what we find is they're looking across a large number of systems and solutions, an average of 9, which means, if it's an average of 9, in some organizations, it's a lot more than 9 systems that they're looking for. But what we did find is that the people we spoke to are, a good 60% of the folks that we interviewed and did the research with do see the potential for something like AI to actually help automate mundane tasks and speed things up, but an equal number don't really believe their organization has the skills to capitalize on AI. And we believe we've got an approach that can actually address that. And I'm going to talk through that and our approach. So first off, before thinking about the approach, what do we mean by AI? Well, artificial intelligence is a very fluid term at the moment. What people term as AI varies, but what we're going to talk really about for the rest of this presentation pretty much falls under the umbrella of machine learning. which is sort of a subset of artificial intelligence. But the idea behind artificial intelligence is not to replace a human. It's really to enhance what we can do as humans. For us, AI is about understanding content and data as well as a human can do it, but be able to do it at a speed and a scale that is not achievable by a human. So that's what when we're thinking about artificial intelligence and Nuxio, that's our key phrase, if you like, is that we want to understand content and data as well as a knowledgeable human, but be able to do it at a speed and scale. And to do that, we're really looking at 7 things. The ability to recognize content types, have a solution that actually knows the difference between a document, an image, and a video, and maybe what sort of image it is, and what sort of file format it is, and where it came from. Understand the difference between a PDF and a Word document. Understand the difference between a video file and maybe a 3D design file, or an InDesign file and a JPEG, and recognize the content types and the inherent information that comes with each of those content types. And then to be able to extract data from the content. If you actually look at a photograph or an image, there's a lot of information involved there. Not just what's the subject matter, but if there's a signpost in there, what's actually written on the signpost. Maybe it's relevant about, what was the location is relevant. Maybe the time of day or the time of year it was taken is relevant. Who's in it? What are they wearing? All these sort of things that we want to be able to extract from the content, and then really enrich the metadata that goes with that. If you think typically, when you load an image, you get a lot of metadata, technical metadata about how the photograph was taken, what system it was taken on, what cameras it was taken on, how it was taken, maybe who took it, time and day, but not really much about the actual information that's embedded within the image. And what we want to do is enrich the metadata about the content with more of that sort of information. And then predictively deliver information based on the customer, where they are, what time of year it is, what are they looking at, what's their previous purchase behavior, that sort of thing. And then analyze actually what content is being used, where it's being used, what content actually generates the most results, what content do customers and clients see as the most important. And then start to recognize the patterns and connections within it. And this is an area where AI, can really help in terms of doing some deep learning and understanding that, this situation is similar to this other situation, and can we put them together? Just to give an example of that, we have an insurance company client who, basically when somebody uploads the picture of a car accident, it looks at all the other pictures of similar accidents between the same 2 makes of cars, and it understands that there's a pattern there. Not something that an individual insurance agent is necessarily going to recognize as it comes in, or be able to think, oh, we had something similar 5 months ago, how does it compare? But using AI, we can start to do that and start to make those connections. And also start to identify outlying data points where we've actually, starting to see trends developing and so forth. So these are the promises of artificial intelligence and what we believe they can really bring to an image studio environment, and actually really help increase the value of the assets and the imagery that we're producing. So when we talk about AI, what we want to use AI for is really to enrich and add value to our assets and our imagery, use that to help to make decisions, and then optimize the usage. And the way we do that is really a 2-level one. We have a foundational AI. We use the generic AI services. So these are the broad set of public services that are in common use, and talk a bit more about those in the next slide. And then add on to that a layer of business-specific AI, where we're actually developing models that are specific to your business case, to the domains, your expertise, where we can deliver more meaningful outcomes for the business. So I said about generic AI. Generic AI is the foundation. That's really using information that's out, existing services that are out there from different providers. Just an example, Amazon provides things like image and video recognition, transcriptions, text extract, translation. There are other services out there that provide equally good generic services, and by pulling those together, we can actually normalize the information and the returns that we get from them. So we get more power, but that's really coming from a general corpus of knowledge that's every time anybody runs one of the AI web services, it pulls into that corpus. So while you get good information, it just tends to be a very high level generic type of information and things come back. But it's very scalable. We can use that to really enrich billions of documents, billions of digital assets very quickly, and consolidate searches and find information quickly. So just to give an example, you know, if we actually want to use generic AI on this image, which is actually a image from Ford, and if we run it through things like Google Cloud Vision API service to see what's on there, what it does is, by running some generic AI, it really demonstrates the ability of machine learning to look at this image and start to see what's in it and apply some data to those assets. And that will actually make this image more findable, because if you started pulling things and adding it to the metadata and your search engines and your DAM or external search engines will be able to find it more easily, the more metadata, the more tagging there is around it. But because it is a generic return, it is actually sort of somewhat limited in the accuracy and relevancy of what we get back. And it's not really specific to our business. So if we run this image through the Google Cloud Vision, we get back a set of tags that look something like this. And they're useful things. You know, if I want to go and look and find an image that has a van and an SUV in it, it will bring back this image. You know, if I actually want to go and look for an image that's got a Chevy Tahoe, it will pull that, you know, and a minibus, it will pull that back. So, you know, it brings back some useful information. Some of it's a bit dubious, you know, I'm not quite sure whether we'd ever actually just want to go and search for something that says, you know, a tire. You know, if I'm searching for an image with a tire, I don't necessarily expect something like this. So it's a bit limited in its applicability, but it's much more findable. And it's starting to extract some of the information that's inherent within the image. But if we start adding business-specific machine learning, we can do a lot more. So what do I mean when we talk about business-specific machine learning? So what we're really talking about is actually building content bots and models that are basically trained on your own content as an organization. You know, what's important to you? What does your content look like? We actually also want to train it on both content and data. So looking at multiple inputs and multiple outputs. And the way that we build our bots is they continuously evolve in an automated training cycle. So each time you run it, it's learning more and more. It's getting better and better. And we've actually also, within the Nuxio solution, built in what we call a human-in-the-loop system for active learning, where we take some of the results and we actually send them out to denominated subject matter experts, so they can look at them and see whether the AI has actually got it right or wrong, and provide maybe even more information to help the bot get even better and better. So really just keeping a human in the loop helps keep things quality high, keeps the accuracy high, keeps people involved, and actually uses their subject matter expertise and their knowledge to actually make things better and better so we can work at scale. So it really becomes the AI and the human working together to provide the service, rather than, it's not about one replacing the other. It's really about one leverage, the AI leveraging the knowledge of the human to do things at a scale that a human would find overwhelming. And as that's going on, what we actually want to do is see if things are working. So we actually want to do real-time performance monitoring, looking at things so we can see if a model is working or we're getting a degradation in quality. Look at any machine-generated content metadata, make any corrections as need be, audit it, look at it, and maybe even fail back if we find a model is not working we want the ability to actually go back to a previous model and a previous version and revert back to that to make sure things are working. So really, when we're talking about business-specific machine learning services, we're really thinking about those two things. It's about building bots around your particular information, your particular domain of expertise, making sure it's in a continuous training loop alongside the human, and then monitoring how that's actually working, and if need be, having the ability to actually revert back to a previous version and run audits and run reports and making sure that things work okay. So how does that sort of work with this previous example? So if we take the same photograph and we run it through a more business specific model, you can see it's actually pulled out much more specific information. Like, I don't know if you noticed in the previous version, but there was actually a person in the background there. So it sort of focused in on who's that and actually did some facial recognition, John Smith. And what, you know, we got a lot more than a minivan this time. We got the vehicle color, the van, you know, where it was licensed. If we go over to the sort of SUV, we got the actual license number extracted. If you think about it, if you're that insurance company, maybe that I talked about earlier in this sort of a B2B environment, you could take that license plate and see if that's actually already been involved in other accidents or other claims. Go maybe get, you know, once you know that the driver is John Smith, you can go and see if he's a customer and whether he's actually got an existing policy, what that policy is. And as I mentioned about the deep learning and making connections, looking at this sort of photograph, you can set, you know, see, have we got similar previous claims of these two types of vehicles with this sort of damage? And if so, you know, what was the repair cost? And maybe even, you know, if pulling the metadata in from the imagery, is knowing where this photograph was taken and send out repair requests to maybe 3 or 4 repair shops that you have on file within a 50-mile radius, find the top 2 or 3, send it right back to John Smith and say, you know, here's your claim, here's the nearest repair shop, here's the estimate, go get it done. And it's all done very quickly, probably without a human being involved, but it's actually just getting that information back to the customer very, very quickly, all based on the information that's contained within the image and the fact that we've built some business-specific AI around it. So really, these custom models produce much more relevant data values that we can use. And we can get, by extracting the entities from within an image, again, we can start to enable the sort of workflow automation that I mentioned. And the business value really does increase the more specific the data. And actually, it also makes it much more findable and searchable, because now if you're looking for specific things, you know, if you're actually going into the database and looking at, you know, can I get photographs of from all the claims that John Smith submitted over the last 20, you know, 10 years or something, we can get that. You know, can you get me every photograph that's involved with a Chevy Tahoe with this license plate? We can get that information a lot quicker and find information a lot more specifically. So you're going to get fewer results of your search is that are actually a lot more usable and a lot more findable. So your information is not going to get lost in the massive data that you've got. Okay, so the way we approach it is our AI application that sits on top of the Nuxio platform and actually can work with other dams as well. It's called Nuxio Insight. And it took that approach that I talked about earlier in terms of the continuously learning content bots and the ability to do performance monitoring, auditing, failback, and so forth. So to give you a couple of actual examples of the use case for customer insight, this is apparel manufacturer. Generally, they tend to have 2 types of products. You have your static product shot and then the lifestyle image. And if you actually want to start thinking about applying metadata and having a human applying metadata, if you look at the standard product image, you know, there's probably 2 areas of expertise we'd need here. You know, somebody who knows who the talent is, who the model is, so we can check as to whether, you know, there's any usage rights, particularly if it's a celebrity, if there's any usage rights around that model, or are there any markets we can and can't use that person? Are they still in contract? And then somebody else who maybe you know, is an expert on the apparel that's in there. You know, what brand of shirt is this? What particular shirt is it? You know, what's the khaki shorts? And then, but when you get to things like lifestyle images, this becomes a lot more complex, because not only are we having to have somebody who knows, you know, where, excuse me, who the models are, but also, you know, and the clothing, but also maybe what campaign is this being used in, what geographies is it being used in, and so forth. And this is where AI can really help. So by running Nuxio Insight against these sort of images, we can really pull out, you know, we can get the basics of what sort of shot type is it? Is it a solo model? Is it a group shot? Is it side shot, back shot? Interesting. Talking of back shots isn't actually, we can, you know, we can do, you know, who is the talent? Who are the models just by using facial recognition? I was going to talk about back shots. One of the interesting things is if somebody had taken a picture of this, drawing this from behind or at side where you can't see the model's face, the AI can sort of make a very educated guess who the model is based on the fact that it's somebody wearing the same clothes in the same environment, clearly taken during the same photo shoot. So if it was model A on the shot with the face, wearing the stripy shirt and the red hat, and we've got somebody else in the same location from the same photo shoot wearing a stripy shirt and a red hat, but we can't see his face, then it's probably 99.9% certain it's the same model. So we can start applying that sort of logic and thinking behind it. You know, one of the things we can also do is start pulling out the related products. If you think about this from an e-commerce perspective, it's really, really powerful because, you know, if somebody goes to the lifestyle, clicks on looking for the striped polo shirt, we can start linking to all the other image assets and all the other products that are in the photo and say, you know, well, you know, if you're buying this shirt, you might like the white chino shorts and the red hat and the sunglasses, and, you know, how about the blue shirt and the blue shorts? So we can start doing related products and things like that. We can start tagging, using AI to tag when, you know, what season it was taken in, what season it's been used. Like I say, you know, link it to things like contracts, link it to product information management systems. So we get all the latest product information for folks who maybe are on the point of sale and are looking at these sort of images in on a website or something. They can get all the, you know, the product dimensions, what sizes the shirts are available in, what markets they're available in, things like that. And actually, one of the things that you may or may not find fascinating, but what came as a surprise to us, was that when we were doing this and running this model, was the AI could actually figure out who the photographer was. So in some cases where when photos were uploaded and it wasn't tagged who the photographer was on the photo shoot, the AI could actually do that based on the fact of the way that certain photographers within the pool of photographers used by this company, within the hundreds or so photographers they used, you know, what were the typical shots that and layout and that a photographer used, and I actually started to predict and tag who the photographers were with a really high degree of accuracy, which was not something we were expecting, but it's was an added benefit. So that's sort of some of the use cases that we're finding, and the fact that we could actually do this meant that the company could bring on a brand new brand into their online portal a lot quicker than they had by actually having people sitting and manually tagging thousands of photographs, which is a repetitive, boring job. And again, you know, they would need multiple SMEs, you know, somebody who knew the talent, somebody who knew the product, somebody who knew the associated product, somebody who knew the brand, somebody who knew the marketing campaigns and the geography, so that, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 SMEs needed to do that, and instead they can do it all very quickly using the AI. So how do we actually get to the levels of accuracy? It actually, again, came as a surprise to us as to how few assets we needed to really start getting good results. So when we initially building a model to look for talent, we uploaded around 640 images with the talent, and that got us to the baseline of just under 50% accuracy. But then by just adding another 100 photographs, we actually got up to about 85% accuracy. Now, 85% is what most studies will tell you that a knowledgeable human will get to. It doesn't matter how great the SME is, you're probably only ever going to be around 85% accurate if you have a human tagging things and trying to recognize things. By adding yet another 100, we got up to 90, high 90% accuracy rate. And as you can see, it sort of plateaus off, and gets up to around excuse me, you know, in the high 90s. Just to give you another example, we have a client who is a hotel chain, and when they are going to open a new hotel, not so much these days, but previously when they were going to open a new hotel, they'd send out photographers and they'd take hundreds, thousands of images of the new hotel property. And then they would come back and, you know, people would actually sit down and go through all those, and then they would tag them up with, you know, is this a photograph of a conference room? Is this a photograph of the lobby? Is this a photograph of the bar? Is this the swimming pool? Is this a guest room? And so forth. But what would happen, one, it's tedious and would take a long time, but it would also, they would never really get above the 85% accuracy, because you would get somebody who would say this is a bedroom, and then somebody else would say this is a guest room. Even if they had a corporate taxonomy, there was still inconsistency. By building the right models and applying the right models, they can now actually upload and categorize all those images very, very quickly, within seconds. And in some areas, we're getting 100% accuracy in terms of knowing whether this is an image of the guest room versus this is an image of the bar or whatever. So really good business case there, because it was taking so long and they were inaccurate, it was actually slowing down the time frame for launching a new hotel, just because they were having to sit and tag all these images, and now they've shortened that considerably. So just to give you a couple of examples of how it can apply. So really the way, if you sort of come out of this with one thing, to me, it's thinking about beyond the traditional metadata. You know, with any image, we get the basic metadata that comes in with the image, but if we start using AI and linking it and connecting the stuff that's coming out of the image, you know, extracting the entities that are in the image, extracting the things that are in it, linking it to your product information, really making the photography and the photo studio the center of that digital supply chain, and be the area that provides that connective tissue, and then use AI to be able to do it at a scale and consistency that has formerly been impossible, really places the in-house studio, I think, at the center of what could be a very, very impactful business system and business supply chain. So if you think about it here in terms of, you know, if this was an image taken just to highlight the nail polish, well, you know, by understanding who the model is, you know, do we have the celebrity usage rights? What's the contract? Hang on, if it's the nail polish, can we also, well, we'll, you know, do a, you know, something around the foundation? Can we promote the eyeliner and the blush and the lipstick that go with it, and things like that? So we can, again, really add value. And again, if you think of this in a B2B instance, that could be, you know, taking one product and applying lots of different products. I used to work for a manufacturer of major construction stuff, and, you know, we used to get 9 times the revenue from the spare parts than we did from the actual equipment that we sold. And if you think about it, if you can actually just put up an image and then link to all the replaceable parts on a piece of equipment in a B2B environment, and then link that to your online e-commerce sales platform or your dealer network or so forth, drives a lot of value and a lot of revenue just out of the imagery, and by linking your content to your data, and then applying AI and models to be able to do it in a scalable, consistent way. And I think, yeah, that was the end. So again, if you want to come out of this with anything, it's just that thinking about going beyond the basic metadata and linking your content with data and using AI to do it in a scalable way, so you can find it, don't have to recreate it, and really add value to the business. So thank you. If you want to get hold of me, if you have any questions that we don't talk about over the next few minutes, you can get me at aporter2@nuxio.com, or you can get me on Twitter @thecontentpool. And if you'd like to dive a bit deeper into some of the ideas that I just talked about, we actually have a white paper available called the same title as this webinar, Reducing Image Hide and Seek with AI, which you can get at the nuxio.com resource center. So thank you very much for your time. And if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to take a crack at answering them.